When she walked away, you felt the finality of it. The silence, the emotional drop, the moment where you realized the dynamic was no longer in your control. And just when you started accepting that reality, something unexpected happened. She came back, not loudly, not with a clear apology, not with certainty, but with curiosity, mixed signals, messages that feel familiar but different, interest that exists but feels cautious. And now you're confused, because the question is no longer why she left. The real question is why she wants you back now. Most men assume this is a second chance, a correction, proof that they mattered more than they thought. And that belief is dangerous, because it causes them to react emotionally instead of strategically. Here's the truth no one tells you. When a woman walks away and then returns, it is rarely because she suddenly realized she loved you. It is because something changed in the emotional balance. Something she expected to happen didn't. Something she assumed about you turned out to be wrong. What she felt when she left was certainty. What she feels now is uncertainty. And uncertainty is what brings people back. When she walked away, she expected emotional safety. She expected access. She expected you to remain emotionally available, even from a distance. She expected to be able to return if she wanted, without resistance, without consequence. But something disrupted that expectation. You didn't chase the way she thought you would. You didn't collapse emotionally. You didn't beg for clarity or reassurance. You moved forward. And that movement is what changed everything. Because the moment she realized you were no longer waiting, the emotional power shifted. She lost the ability to confirm her decision was right. She lost the comfort of knowing you were still there. And without that comfort, the mind does something dangerous. It reconsiders, not the past arguments, not the reasons she left, but the version of you she no longer has access to. This is why her return feels different. It is not driven by love. It is driven by loss of certainty. And this is where most men make their biggest mistake. They rush to reconnect. They explain themselves again. They overgive access too quickly. And by doing that, they destroy the very reason she came back in the first place. In this video, you're going to understand why she left, why she came back, and what determines whether this turns into real commitment or another disappearance. Because when a woman returns after walking away, the rules are different. If you handle this moment correctly, you regain control of the dynamic. If you mishandle it, you lose her again, this time for good. If she walked away and now wants you back, stay with me. Because what you do next decides everything. Before we start, a quick reminder. The real transformation doesn't happen on YouTube. It happens inside the community. If these videos have opened your eyes, what's inside will rebuild your mindset completely. It's not just a course, it's a brotherhood. A private space where men master attraction, emotional control, and the psychology of power. You don't join for a month, you join for life. Every future course, book, and lesson is yours forever. No subscriptions, no limits. Just one decision that changes your direction. If you're serious about growth, discipline, and purpose, click the link below. Join the community. Enroll once, grow forever. Let's dive in. Section 1. Why her return is about loss of control, not love. When a woman walks away and later returns, the biggest mistake a man can make is assuming her return is proof of renewed love or clarity. Love does not disappear and reappear suddenly. Emotional attachment, however, is deeply influenced by control, certainty, and expectation. What usually brings her back is not a surge of affection, but the disruption of an emotional assumption she was relying on. When she walked away, she believed she understood the outcome. She believed she knew how you would react. In most cases, she expected emotional availability, lingering attachment, or at the very least, reassurance that she still mattered. Even if she wanted distance, she assumed access would remain. That assumption gave her emotional safety. She could leave without fully losing you. But when you did not behave as expected, something shifted. You did not chase. You did not plead. You did not try to convince her to stay. Instead, you accepted the separation and redirected your life forward. And that response removed a form of emotional control she didn't realize she had been holding. The certainty that once stabilized her decision disappeared. And when certainty disappears, the mind begins to question. This questioning is not romantic. It is psychological. Her return is often driven by a loss of emotional leverage. She no longer knows where she stands with you. She no longer knows if the door is open. She no longer knows if you are emotionally attached to her decision. And that lack of knowledge creates discomfort. People are drawn back to what they can no longer predict. This is why her return often feels cautious, indirect, or inconsistent. She may test the waters rather than step forward fully. She may reach out casually rather than clearly. She may show interest without offering commitment. This behavior is not confusion. It is assessment. She is trying to re-establish her sense of emotional positioning. Another critical factor is that her return is rarely about fixing the past. It is about restoring a sense of control in the present. She wants to know whether she still matters, whether she still has access, and whether you are still emotionally available if she chooses to re-enter. This is why men who rush to reconnect often lose her again. By immediately restoring access, they restore certainty. And once certainty returns, the emotional motivation that brought her back fades. A smart man understands that her return is not a reward. It is a test of boundaries, self-respect, and emotional discipline. It is an opportunity to observe behavior rather than react to words. It is a moment where patience matters more than enthusiasm. Her return does not mean she is ready. It means she is unsure. And uncertainty is only resolved through consistent behavior over time, not emotional reassurance in the moment. If you misread her return as love, you will overinvest. If you understand it as loss of control, you will remain grounded. And that grounding is what determines whether this reconnection becomes real or disappears again. Because the dynamic that caused her to leave has not yet been rewritten. It is being tested. And how you respond next decides who holds the emotional center moving forward. Section 2. The hidden test. She's running the moment she reappears. The moment she comes back into your life, a test begins. Not a test she announces, and not a test she may even be fully aware of, but a psychological assessment that determines whether reconnecting with you feels safe, familiar, or different enough to justify staying this time. This test is not about attraction. It is about structure. When she returns, she is observing whether the version of you she left behind still exists. She is watching to see if your emotional center collapses back into her hands, or if it remains grounded where it belongs. Every response you give, every tone you use, and every boundary you maintain feeds information into this assessment. The hidden test is simple but unforgiving. She is asking herself whether access to you is still immediate and unconditional, or whether something has changed permanently. She wants to know if her return automatically restores emotional safety, or if she must now meet you differently to remain connected. This is why her behavior often feels ambiguous. She may reach out warmly but vaguely. She may reference the past without taking responsibility for it. She may test availability with casual messages or late-night check-ins. None of this is accidental. It is probing. If you respond with instant availability, emotional explanations, or excitement that outweighs her effort, the test is answered quickly. You are the same. The dynamic is the same. And once that certainty returns, the emotional motivation that brought her back fades again. But if you respond calmly, proportionally, and without emotional overinvestment, something different happens. The test remains unresolved. She does not regain control. She feels connection without dominance, and that unsettled balance forces her to decide whether she is willing to step forward with real consistency. Another important aspect of this test is accountability. When she returns, she is also gauging whether she can bypass responsibility for leaving. If the door opens easily without acknowledgement, she learns that distance has no consequence. That lesson makes future disappearances more likely, not less. A man who understands this does not confront her return aggressively. He does not demand explanations or apologies, but he also does not erase the past by pretending nothing happened. He allows the reconnection to move slowly, guided by her behavior rather than her words. This creates a new emotional framework. She no longer feels in control of the outcome. She no longer feels guaranteed access. She no longer feels free to drift without consequence. And that shift is exactly what determines whether this return leads to respect or repetition. The hidden test is not about whether you accept her back. It is about whether you accept yourself back into the same role you once played. If you do, history repeats. If you don't, the dynamic evolves. Most men fail this test not because they lack value, but because they confuse opportunity with obligation. They feel grateful for the return instead of grounded in their position. A man who passes the test does not rush. He observes. He matches effort. He allows time to reveal intention. And by doing so, he sends a message stronger than any boundary speech ever could. It says, "My presence is not automatic. It is earned through consistency." And that message changes everything. Section 3. Why rushing to reconnect makes her lose interest again. When she comes back, the emotional temptation to reconnect quickly is powerful. Relief mixes with hope. Familiarity feels comforting. And many men mistake that emotional surge for progress. But psychologically, rushing to reconnect does not rebuild attraction. It dissolves it. The reason is simple. Rushing restores the old dynamic before anything has changed. When you immediately open emotional access, increase availability, or resume intimacy as if nothing happened, you erase the very conditions that caused her return. You give her certainty too fast. And certainty removes curiosity, tension, and emotional investment. Attraction does not grow in certainty. It grows in earned security. When she left, the dynamic lacked something essential. It may have been balance, emotional leadership, boundaries, or respect. Her return does not magically fix that absence. It only creates an opportunity to see whether it can be fixed. Rushing closes that opportunity before it has a chance to work. Another problem with rushing is that it communicates fear of loss. Even if you don't say it, your behavior says, "I need this to work." That emotional need shifts the balance instantly. She senses that her presence stabilizes you again, and once she feels that, the motivation to invest disappears. People rarely stay where they feel emotionally needed more than chosen. Rushing also prevents her from demonstrating consistency. Anyone can show interest briefly. Anyone can reach out during uncertainty. What matters is whether effort continues when novelty fades. When you rush, you reward a moment instead of waiting for a pattern. And rewarding moments teaches the wrong lesson. A smart man understands that reconnection must be slower than the return. He allows conversation to unfold naturally. He keeps his life full and his availability measured. He does not rush to define the connection, but he also does not drift emotionally. He stays centered. This creates a new emotional climate. She no longer feels like she has stepped back into the same relationship. She feels like she is entering something unfamiliar, something that requires awareness and effort. That unfamiliarity is what keeps interest alive. Rushing feels loving, but psychologically it feels predictable. And predictability is exactly what caused attraction to fade the first time. This does not mean you play games or withhold intentionally. It means you allow time to do what emotion cannot. Time reveals effort. Time reveals intention. Time reveals whether this return is real or reactive. When you rush, you take that power away from time. When you slow down, you let reality speak. And that brings us to the next critical insight. Because slowing down only works if you understand what kind of behavior actually signals genuine change. Section 4. The signs. Her return is real and not just emotional curiosity. Not every return is meaningful. Some returns are driven by loneliness, uncertainty, or a need for reassurance rather than genuine intention. The difference between a real return and emotional curiosity is not found in what she says. It is revealed through behavior over time. A real return shows up as consistency, not intensity. Emotional curiosity often comes with strong emotion at first. Warm messages, nostalgia, late-night conversations, but it fades quickly once reassurance is restored. Genuine intention, on the other hand, grows steadily. It does not rush. It does not spike and disappear. It builds. One of the clearest signs her return is real is effort without prompting. She reaches out consistently, not only when it suits her emotions. She follows through on plans instead of keeping things vague. She makes space in her life rather than fitting you into leftover moments. This effort feels calm, not dramatic. Another key sign is accountability without defensiveness. A woman who truly wants to rebuild does not avoid the past. She does not rewrite history to protect her ego. She acknowledges that leaving had impact, even if she does not over-explain it. Emotional curiosity avoids responsibility. Genuine intention accepts it naturally. You will also notice emotional availability, not just attention. She listens, not only talks. She engages with your boundaries instead of testing them. She does not disappear when depth increases. Emotional curiosity often retreats when real connection requires effort. Genuine return leans in. Timing also matters. A real return respects pace. She does not rush intimacy or commitment to lock you back in emotionally. She allows things to unfold. She understands that trust needs to be rebuilt through behavior, not accelerated through emotion. Most importantly, a genuine return does not require you to chase clarity. You do not feel confused. You do not feel like you are guessing. Even if things are slow, they feel grounded. Emotional curiosity, by contrast, keeps you uncertain. It pulls you close and then creates distance again. A smart man does not confront her about her intentions. He watches what survives over time. He lets effort reveal truth. He does not reward words. He responds to patterns. This is how you avoid repeating the same cycle. You stop being pulled by emotion and start being guided by observation. And that shift is what allows a return to become something new rather than a replay of the past. But recognizing real intention is only half the equation. The other half is knowing what not to do once you see it. Section 5. What to do if you want her back without losing power again. Wanting her back is not the problem. Losing yourself in the process is. Most men fail at this stage, not because they lack discipline, but because they confuse emotional openness with emotional surrender. They think wanting someone back requires proving it. In reality, it requires holding your center. The first rule is simple but difficult to execute. You do not resume the relationship where it left off. You allow something new to form. That means you do not fall back into old routines, old dynamics, or old emotional patterns simply because familiarity feels good. Familiarity is what broke attraction the first time. You stay present, but not overly available. You stay warm, but not emotionally dependent. You communicate, but you do not chase. This balance signals that you are open to connection, not desperate for it. And that distinction is everything. Another crucial step is letting her invest before you escalate. Investment creates attachment, not the other way around. When she initiates plans, follows through, and shows consistency, you reciprocate. When she slows down, you match that pace without complaint. This proportional response teaches emotional responsibility without confrontation. You also avoid the temptation to rehash the past emotionally. That does not mean ignoring what happened, but it means not using emotion to repair it. Emotional repair feels relieving, but it weakens structure. Structure is what keeps attraction alive this time. If the past needs to be addressed, it is done calmly, briefly, and without blame. Most importantly, you continue building your life independently of the outcome. Your goals, routines, and direction do not pause because she returned. When she sees that your world did not stop spinning, she understands something has changed. You are no longer centered around the relationship. The relationship must now align with your life. This is how power is maintained. Not through control, but through non-attachment to outcome. When she senses that you are choosing her, not needing her, the dynamic stabilizes. And if she cannot meet that energy consistently, you do not fight it. You observe it, you respect it, and you adjust accordingly. Because the man who keeps his power does not cling to what returned. He evaluates whether it deserves to stay. And that brings us to the final truth of this situation, the one most men never hear clearly enough. Section 6. The one boundary that determines whether she stays or leaves again. There is one boundary that matters more than all others when she comes back, and it is not a spoken rule, an ultimatum, or a condition you announce. It is a behavioral boundary that exists whether you name it or not. That boundary is emotional priority. When she returns, she is unconsciously checking whether she can once again become the emotional center of your life. Not because she wants control in a malicious way, but because emotional priority equals safety. If she feels that your mood, direction, and sense of self reorganize around her presence, she relaxes. And when she relaxes too early, attraction fades again. The boundary that determines everything is whether your life continues to move forward with or without her. A man who loses her again is usually the man who subtly rearranges his world to accommodate her return. His schedule shifts, his energy refocuses, his emotional availability expands too quickly. None of this looks dramatic, but it is felt immediately. She senses that she has resumed emotional priority, and the dynamic slides back into familiarity. A man who keeps her is the man who remains emotionally centered elsewhere. His purpose, routine, and identity stay intact. He welcomes her presence, but he does not reorganize his life around it. She fits into his world. She does not replace it. This boundary is powerful because it cannot be negotiated. You cannot fake it. You either have a life that continues moving forward independently, or you do not. And she will feel that truth long before you say anything. When this boundary is held, something important happens psychologically. She does not feel chased, but she also does not feel taken for granted. She feels chosen, not needed. And being chosen is what creates lasting attraction. If she senses that she must now maintain alignment to stay connected, she invests. She shows consistency. She respects pacing. She becomes more emotionally present. Not because you demanded it, but because the structure of the dynamic requires it. If she senses that she can drift again without consequence, she will. Not out of cruelty, but out of comfort. Comfort without structure leads to repetition. This is why words matter far less than rhythm. How often you see her, how available you are, how quickly you respond, how much emotional weight you place on her presence. All of these communicate whether the boundary exists. The man who keeps his boundary does not threaten to leave. He does not warn her. He does not explain the rules. He simply lives in a way where emotional priority is already occupied by his own direction. And that creates respect. Because the woman who stays after walking away is not the one who is convinced to stay. She is the one who feels that staying now requires showing up differently. That is the boundary that decides whether her return becomes real or temporary. And it is the boundary that protects you either way. In short, when she walked away, the dynamic broke. When she came back, the dynamic was tested. What happens next has very little to do with her feelings and everything to do with your self-respect. Her return is not a promise, it is an opportunity. An opportunity to respond differently. An opportunity to stay grounded. An opportunity to see whether this connection can exist without you shrinking. If you rush, overgive, or abandon your center, the cycle repeats. If you stay calm, proportional, and self-directed, the dynamic either evolves or ends cleanly. Both outcomes protect you. The mistake is thinking her return means you should try harder. The truth is, her return is asking whether you are willing to stay who you became when she left. Because that version of you is the reason she came back. If she walked away and now wants you back, the power is not in convincing her to stay. The power is in deciding whether she fits the life you continued building without her. And that is the position of a man who never loses himself again. Remember, knowledge means nothing without action. If you're ready to rise above emotion and lead with purpose, join the community today at the link below. Enroll once, grow forever.